Welcome back, everybody. I'm here with Scott Hagnes. I'm Sean LaFlock. This is Conversations, Fitness, Wellness, and Longevity. Scott, how's it going?
Yeah, it's going pretty good, pretty good. New digs today, home base on a
I
Sunday.
see, man. I see. Yeah, we're doing this a little later than we usually do, but I guess it allows us for a little bit more insight, a little bit different perspective on the week. We got it through everything. Um, you know, how has your week been going there, Scott?
It was pretty good. We had a couple of good Thanksgiving celebrations. That was all good. One we went to and one we had here. So just gonna eat some
That's
leftovers and
right. That's right. We're finishing up Thanksgiving here, so happy Thanksgiving to you, and happy Thanksgiving to everybody who's watching and listening.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, how was yours?
It was good. I tried to stay away from as much gluten as I could that day because, I have been trying to be more lenient on myself and more gracious to myself. But I know that there's probably some underlying physical ramifications of sticking to too much. That's too much of a good thing, so to speak. So I'll
Mm,
have like here and there. But I went off the rails at a wedding the weekend before, and my sleep was trashed. My freaking right knee was so inflamed. Obviously, you're dancing and that kind of stuff, so there's probably a little bit of that. But it was so cranky for about 3 days. It was just so.
ooh,
My hands were puffy the next day.
oh yeah. Well, that's a sign of something.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I was just puffy all over the place. So, it's like hors d'oeuvres and like a lot of sodium and stuff like that. But I'm not, just completely stay away from that stuff. So I figured it probably was a little bit about sensitivities, maybe some dairy, all that kind of stuff. So, I mean, I was eating everything and anything because I was like, let's just see how this goes. Yeah, I pretty much knew how it went after that. So I going into Thanksgiving, I was a little bit more all right, conservative. So I dabble in dairy. That's not too much of an issue, but like I think just straight up wheat is a tough one for me.
Mm,
Do you find
yeah.
that at all? Have you play around
Uh,
with that kind of stuff
I
at all?
yeah, I mean, I've been a lot more lenient and definitely not too concerned about avoiding wheat.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but at the end of the day, I don't really have it that much because both my wife and son are really quite gluten sensitive,
Yeah,
and so we
just
tend
it's
not
not
to
even in
have
the
much,
life.
and it's not in the house really, and yeah, just and then we haven't really eaten it for, geez, I don't even know, maybe 12 to 15 years, maybe.
Wow.
But I like I said, I'll have some, like, I ride my bike a ton more, and kind of a post Saturday session is sometimes to grab a slice of pizza that's really
Yeah,
near where we ride, and I'll do
yeah.
that.
It's
Not
got to be worth it.
not every week, but it's a good pizza, and
Yeah.
um, yeah, so occasionally like that. But yeah, on Thanksgiving I noticed, you know, two meals, neither one don't really get stuffed because I don't really feel a need to gorge myself because I eat
Yeah.
enough on a routine basis that just like we kind of a family Sunday dinner, and it's always sort of big. I don't think I eat any more on Thanksgiving than I would on any given Sunday evening family dinner. And so it's yeah, it was
Okay.
all good. Feels good.
It's a nice little segue into something that I have been working on for actually a year now. So I did my first mediator release test in September of 2016. After the mediator release test, I then went into that SIBO testing protocol, which was in December of 2016. So it's been a full year.
Full year. Yeah, I remember we talked about that a fair amount,
It's
and
unbelievable,
it's hard
right?
to believe it's a yeah.
It felt like yesterday. So yeah, it's interesting how when things feel like yesterday, why do we wait so long to start doing stuff, right? Because it goes by so quickly anyway. You know what I mean? It's
Hmm.
like, like 4 years of college. Oh, I don't know if I could do that, but like it goes by like that. Like your life goes by so quickly anyway. You might as well do things that are actually conducive to growth anyway. All right, sorry, segue.
Yeah.
Sorry, a bit of a tangent. Anyway, so I started looking into so underlying causes of SIBO. There's a few main things that naturopaths, functional medicine doctors look into. Obviously, one of them has or the underlying causes of SIBO are things like low digestive enzymes and juices. So basically, like your pH and your enzymes of your stomach are low. That leads to bacteria actually being introduced into your digestive tract and not being broken down, and then they can just kind of latch on and start growing in your upper intestines. Another thing that happens is when you go on antibiotics, that can completely throw off the biome of your gut. And the average person, I think I listened to Chris Kresser, has like 15 to 20 rounds of antibiotics by the time they're like 30 or something like that. I mean, just
Yeah,
think
it's
about it.
crazy.
Like,
Yeah.
like up until 5 years ago, no, up until 7 years ago, basically when I moved down to Florida, every year I'd pretty much go on to a round of antibiotics when I got like that seasonal flu or cold, right? Go on it, take it all the way through. And yes, there's this idea like, okay, you should take it all the way through because of, bacteria or antibiotic resistant bacteria. So I was trying to do it, pay it forward kind of thing. Like, all right, hey, if we all do this, it'll be good. But the when you start to look at what's going on, one, are we really sure that the obviously the benefits outweigh the risk, but are your long term effects from taking the biotics outweighed by the short term solution, right? So you get that lingering kind of deal. You're trying to go to work, you're still training, you're not eating right, you're not hydrating correctly, your vitamins and minerals aren't getting in because your gut is smashed, and you're like, wait a second, like I need an antibiotic. It's like, wait a second, what if you cleaned up all those underlying things, and then when you got sick, it was like a 2 to 3 day thing, and then you just kind of went back into your normal routine rather than going through a round of antibiotics. Sorry, Scott. Rather than going through a round of antibiotics, and then you have no idea where you're at right now because you basically smashed your gut biome.
Mm-hmm,
Does
mm-hmm.
that sound familiar for you? Or does that kind of ring true for you
Totally.
as well?
Yeah, yeah.
So, I would say that nowadays you almost like reserve antibiotics to like, I mean, for me personally, just because I know that, I mean, knock wood, I don't get sick anymore. I haven't been sick like a cold in 2 or 3 years. And it's not like I'm avoiding germs and shit like that. Like, I'm not like scrubbing my hands with Purell and stuff like that. I actually probably don't like get in contact with, or like don't use that stuff as much. I stay away from antibacterial soaps. I mean, I'm not even using fluoride in my toothpaste anymore because I have, I've kind of seen some things, not like tin hat type of things, like we're trying to be controlled through the government through fluoride in the water, but more of the fact that, you get to a point where you really don't need the fluoride. But the other thing is that your mouth has like a biome to it too.
Mm-hmm.
And I was actually listening to Chris Kresser on Joe Rogan's podcast a couple of weeks ago, and how, mouthwash is basically trying to sterilize your mouth, but you need the bacteria in your mouth to protect your teeth. So I think
Mm-hmm.
it was Rob Wolf always talks about that guy who went to all these tribes and photographed their teeth. Do you happen to remember that book?
Yeah, it's Weston A. Price,
Yes.
Nutrition and Physical Degeneration or something like that, I believe. Yeah.
Okay. And how old is that book, Scott? Just for the viewers and listeners.
Oh, geez, wasn't it like the 1930s or something?
Yeah, it's close to a century old, right?
Yeah,
So
somewhere.
obviously you know a little bit about this because you've dabbled in a little bit, but can you give us a brief description of what the hell Weston Price was looking for and what actually he found?
Well, I will confess to have never read the book cover to cover,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
but
At least
he
you
was
you've
basically
had the book
looking at.
though.
I believe we have it at the gym. I don't
Okay,
have
all
it
right. So
here.
you
I'm
at least
actually in my
have it. That's a
office where I
lot
have a
further
ton
than
of
most
books, but it
people.
is actually not here. At least I don't think.
Okay.
But yeah, generally, this is when there were still a lot more traditional cultures still around in the world in like the
Mm-hmm.
20s or 30s or wherever it was,
Yep.
early part of the 19th or 20th century, and looked at the teeth, its bone structure and everything of all these various tribes, and was kind of trying to correlate this with with health, but they didn't find any of the things that we consider normal as far as degeneration of the teeth and dental cavities and various things that we would expect.
Mm-hmm.
So,
So bringing that to today, what can we, extrapolate from a little bit of that information? Obviously, factoring in evolutionary biology.
yeah, well, one thing that none of these folks had toothpaste or
Yeah. Oh,
mouthwash or
yeah,
any
exactly.
of
Yeah.
those sorts of things, and they were, in this healthy state, shows that is probably not the real answer to our problems, and maybe a band-aid approach, like so many things that we've adopted are.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, but if one is overall healthy and lives as close as possible to the way a human should naturally live, you're probably not going to have issues with your teeth. And of course, the foods we're consuming, you have to look at what these folks ate as well.
Mm-hmm.
They're not processed
Yeah.
stuff, and they were not, trashing their internal biome with antibiotics. And
Mm.
the body is designed to be able to do these things on its own relatively well.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So basically, we're hitting on exactly what we were talking about. Like on one end of the spectrum, eating the proper foods that lead to good, low inflammation of the gut, proper permeability of proteins, vitamins, minerals, and all that kind of stuff in between. And then on the other side of it, actually maintaining good gut biome. So that you got your friendly bacteria, beneficial bacteria in there, and you're keeping the low or keeping more invasive, destructive forms of bacteria on the low end of the spectrum, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, going back kind of full circle, what we're talking about in terms of repairing their motility motor complex, that's one of the major reasons for SIBO is that at some point, whether it was through through antibiotics, through a stomach bug, something happened where now you have this basically growth of bacteria in the upper intestine, in the small intestine, where that should be relatively low in bacteria. It should be higher in digestive juices and enzymes to break down proteins and carbohydrates and fats. So that's what should be there. But we have an overgrowth of bacteria, and that bacteria is digesting undigested food yet because the only thing you've done is chew it, gotten squished around in your stomach, basically acidified it, right? And now it's in your intestine, and now bacteria that are there are being opportunistic and actually feeding off of it. So um, what the gut wants to do is push things along and continuing to basically squeeze out everything, and then it's a fresh new start, and then squeeze out everything and it's a fresh new start. So even if you do have an overgrowth of bacteria, eventually it'll be pushed along by this motility motor complex. But what happens is when that's impaired or it starts basically not working, is that it'll sit there, the food will be digested by the bacteria, and then all of a sudden the bacteria proliferate. And even if you do push it along, you still have enough of that residual bacteria that when you do fast, let's say you go to sleep, or you do even practice intermittent fasting, or you're doing a prolonged amount of time between feedings, as soon as you reintroduce food back into that area, the bacteria will start to be active again, start digesting the food, and that's when we lead to the side effects of SIBO, or the symptoms of SIBO: gassiness, bloating, GERD, or diarrhea, or even constipation. So here's where it kind of like gets very interesting for me. So I look at um, the supplement that they recommend using through FDN, which is Functional Diagnostic Nutrition. And the supplement is called like Motil or something like that. It's Mobile T or you might have heard of it before, but let me get the exact name of it. It's called Motil Pro. You're supposed to take 2 to 3 capsules at bedtime. The main ingredients are 5-HTP, B6, and ginger.
Hmm.
For repairing the motility motor complex. The one that stuck out right away for me is the 5-HTP, right? Because that
Uh,
is used to regulate serotonin levels and neurotransmitter levels within the brain.
mm-hmm.
The brain is the gut is the brain. So
Mm-hmm.
I found this absolutely fascinating, that the same types of hormones, or the same types of supplements that we use for, I guess we could call it neurotransmitter and neurotropic effects, are actually similar to the ones that we're actually using within the gut. Because when we
Mm-hmm.
look back evolutionary wise, there really was no distinction between your brain and your gut. They were pretty much one and the same until we started getting higher and higher levels of evolution. But at that point, it seems that we have kind of solidified the need for these particular types of hormones within each of these areas. What does that What does that sound like to you there, Scott?
Yeah, it sounds like a pretty good overview of the of the issue, right? I
Yeah.
mean, the two are the same. You're going to have, yeah, and they're paired intimately every time, I think. Um, very interesting.
Yeah. And the other one was the
Yeah.
ginger, which we've seen time and time again is very much antimicrobial, but
Hmm.
also potentially could have other effects within the gut that we don't necessarily understand just yet. So when we say, okay, it helps repair the motility motor complex, we don't necessarily know in the way, I don't think, but we know that, anecdotally through Chinese medicine and Western and Eastern medicine, you definitely know that ginger and garlic are two of the biggest things that we
Right.
use to just as a catch-all to decrease bacteria, but also improve vitality of the gut and through the body as well.
Hmm. Hmm.
You know,
Yeah. Yeah, garlic
lemon,
very
ginger, garlic,
antimicrobial. Yeah.
and then even in Ireland, if they have the ability, coconut is another one of those things where some of like the
Hmm.
what is it, lauric acid that tends to be
There's the antimicrobial, yeah,
antimicrobial as well.
effects that will have, yeah.
And again, like even though these things are pretty dang tasty in cooking, green onions, garlic, and ginger is almost the base of every Eastern dish. I know in Chinese cooking, it's paramount. It's a
Yeah.
little different in Thai cooking, but I mean, then you look at the overall health of some of these populations, and you say, wow, like it coincides with factoring out like Western influence of junk food, of cigarette use, whatever it might be, right?
Yeah.
Um,
MSG and various things. Yeah.
Exactly, exactly. So, I think when we look at cultures that use cooking to preserve those basic tenets of gut health, we see that they have better overall health.
Yeah.
We see that they have, better prolonged vitality through age. Like you may only live 80 years, but you're like when you're 80, you have this cardiovascular health of a 40-year-old Westerner, so to speak.
Right.
You
Yeah,
know what I mean?
exactly. Yeah,
You're
it's not that early decline of quality of life that you see.
Yeah, yeah. So I thought that was pretty interesting to see, and obviously the B6. I think that's another one of those things that not only is an adrenal thing, but also just to overall gut health. So those are the three main ingredients. I did feel a little bit of a burn, probably from the ginger, because the dosage of the 5-HTP is actually half of what I've been taking, but it's 1,000 milligrams of ginger each night, so that's a full gram of ginger within the protocol. So
Oh yeah,
of a
that could do
concentrated
something.
amount.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. So I was like, all
Yeah.
right. I mean, if it burns, it probably means it's working a little bit, I guess. But I
Something,
might
yeah.
play around with it. Maybe do like it's supposed to be 3 capsules, so I might do two and then one maybe an hour later just to space it out a little bit.
Mm.
So I'm not just getting a bomb of ginger, like an
Ginger bomb in
ginger
there,
bomb as I'm lying down to try and go to sleep. But
yeah. Mm.
I mean, I slept well last night. I'm going to continue on this protocol. It was like $47 for 3 months supply, maybe no 2 months supply for $47. So I think I'm going to continue on with the maintenance protocol of the antimicrobials. So like the Alamax, which is a Alamax is like a ginger derivative or a garlic derivative. And then I'm doing an Entrantil, which is a bunch of different like barks and that kind of stuff. It's a natural supplemental protocol that people use for SIBO D. There's a gastroenterologist who's also a functional medicine doctor out of I think Cal Berkeley, I want to say, or UC Davis, who invented it and then markets it as a supplement. So I'm going to continue on those for maintenance dosages, and then do the Motil Pro and see if we can't just completely get rid of the antimicrobials and just stick with this for a amount of time and then just taper off of that. So kind of some interesting things to kind of think about, and especially toward
Yeah.
the a 1 year out. It's amazing how it's been a year since I started this whole process, but still learning throughout this whole thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we'll definitely. Let's stay up to date on how that goes as you go through it.
Absolutely. Speaking of being up to date, Scott, you had an opportunity to try out some of these progressive aerobic protocols. Which ones have you done this
Mm-hmm.
week?
This week I did the 15-second ramping one for 90 seconds, so 6 stage increases. and with a 3 minute rest for 10 rounds
Yep.
and a block rest of, if I remember right, 8 minutes.
Yep.
Sound about right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
And
you started out the intervals at what pace?
what was I doing?
I think I gave you
50.
I think I gave you
Oh,
30 minute. You got me, Scott?
yeah, yeah.
A 30 minute your 30-minute pace was where you started it, and then you built up every 15 seconds, right?
I think it was, yeah, I was trying to get to a guesstimated 10 minute,
Okay.
test pace by the end. So
Yes.
I guess I didn't start, I might have started a little bit slower than that. I think for me it was 55 RPMs on the low end, and I ramped to 71 by the end. And then again, having not done a ton of training in that domain for a while,
Hmm.
that felt pretty appropriate. I sustained that all 10 rounds.
Okay.
Um, and it had some definite challenge. I wouldn't say it was as hard as the 90 second with a 30-second stage and my
Yeah.
30-second rest.
Yep.
The only round that really I felt a little bit of a bite to was the sixth round. So that's after that
Getting
block
back on.
rest. Getting back on, that one felt a little spicy, but they were recovery was pretty quick. 3 minutes. I did a little bit of upper body, kind
Hmm.
of my first C-type mobility work in every rest, and
Yeah.
roughly a minute. I think my heart rate average over the whole. Actually, my training journal just happens to
Oh,
be
there
right
you go.
here by me because I was jotting in notes while I was waiting for you to call. Actually, so I can. What was the average? Was like 138 through the entire thing. That was spiking to like the 160s on the work phase, but given the amount of rest, it was like
Yep. And again,
so good.
I think that sounds probably appropriate for what the interval is trying to elicit, like an aerobic response. Like if your heart rate was spiking up to 180, then we could say like, all right, this is probably not exactly where we want to be. So I would, what would you classify this? So say that there's, say we had a aerobic threshold, we had VO2 max training, just aerobic capacity work. Like, what would you kind of classify that? Like, how did it feel to you?
It felt a little bit like it was definitely had a feeling of kind of threshold work.
Mm-hmm.
Like I've done a lot of protocols that are generally, where you're working at a steady state. But this was sort of ramping. By the end, it felt like I had done maybe a threshold set. But then it was also a little bit just general, just the sheer length and kind of the steady heart rate over most of it felt a little bit like even almost base work in some degree. Um, it'd be because it was really only the second 45 seconds that starts to get like feel like you're really in that threshold zone. But
Yep. Yep.
yeah, it was a little different. I would say it didn't fit neatly into any
You're absolutely right.
protocol that I've
Definitely a
tried.
blend. Definitely a blend.
Yeah.
And
What would you say you?
we did. I kind of stayed on the bike and did an easy spin as well. So I think maybe clearing out a little bit of the stuff within.
Yeah.
But also, I definitely think feeling gears. I think that's probably one of the biggest things that you're trying to do,
Mm,
with a little bit of fatigue built in there, just being able to kind of gut down a little bit. I mean, obviously, this is my second week doing it. The first week I did it where I started at a 10-minute pace and it was a little bit too much. So I started at a 30-minute pace and then built it from there. So I was starting off at 62 RPMs or 60 RPMs and then going all the way to 70 RPMs. So basically,
mm,
starting off at 30-minute pace and then ending at probably about 8-minute pace,
mm,
8 to 10 minute pace. And I think that's probably a lot more appropriate. Like before I was starting at 10 and probably ending up at like a 3-minute pace. And I think that's probably a little bit
sounds pretty
too
anaerobic
much.
there.
Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely. I mean, again, like, and we've always talked about, it's like, okay,
And
you're never always doing one or the other. So it's like, all right, what are we trying to elicit in this response?
what are you? Yep. Mhm.
And I think on with this one in particular, you're trying to stay within aerobic and keeping this down or obviously minimizing that, but continuing to build aerobic and also keeping this a little bit lower so that you're actually utilizing more of your aerobic system
Aerobic.
than you are on your anaerobic system. So I think
Exactly.
kind of tying what you talked about a few weeks ago.
Yeah. Yeah. That you're able to maybe get a little bit better of an aerobic response because of the ramp up as opposed to just hitting the same domain steady. And
Yep. And
which
basically,
I totally felt like it allowed you to ease into it and a good output.
Yep.
but not feeling, um, definitely not feeling too on the anaerobic side, and whatever was there, I felt cleared really quickly.
Yep.
And maybe it would have even been more if had I stayed on the bike like
Yeah.
you.
Yep.
I'd get back on, with like 30 seconds until my next
Yep.
interval and start just lightly, just
Yep. Start
spinning,
ramping it up a little bit.
yeah, just so it wasn't a sudden, charge at the beginning. I don't like
Yeah.
that so much.
It's very interesting that I was trying to hit that 60 RPMs, and I was like, all right, let's see how long it takes me to hit the 60 RPMs because you always overshoot it.
Yep.
So it would take a good like 7 to 10 seconds to actually get to the like to actually go up and then back down to where you wanted to be.
Yeah. Yeah. I know when I did the 30-second steps the earlier week, then
Yep.
because you only had 30-second rest, I was getting off, I was getting back on. And so it
Yep.
was pretty much go get it up to the speed, but you always overshoot. By the time it came back down, the first 30 seconds was like half gone before I really
Yep.
got into my target there, I felt like.
Yep.
Yeah,
Exactly.
that nice ramp up was, yeah, this time I was able to do it really smoothly. Like,
Mm-hmm. Yep.
yeah,
So,
that was cool. So, where did you find these protocols, or you just swing?
actually, one of my coaches, Chris, he actually works with Michael McGoldrick out of Training Think Tank, and they've been
Oh
kind of
yeah,
tinkering around with some, pacing protocols, but also some of that threshold protocol stuff as well.
oh cool. Yeah,
Again, they're just kind of testing it and seeing what it kind of feels like. But I
yeah,
imagine that there's, some more intricate places where this is coming from. That, like, let's say it's running protocols or
right.
rowing or cycling protocols that people
Yeah,
use, and then we
cross
kind of
country
just
skiing or
exactly
something.
that you're
Yeah,
pulling from it, and then just see how it works based upon the athlete's ability to pace and that kind of stuff. So I think a lot of it is based upon the mindfulness of the athlete and the ability for them to understand what these gears kind of feel like, and then actually training the gears.
yeah. No, I could totally see the value on that. I felt like I was able to really understand where I was at various paces,
Yep.
um, a lot better than, you know,
Yeah. So I guess maybe
re-
there's a probably appropriate time to kind of do this stuff. It wouldn't necessarily be in a build phase, maybe more in that kind of peaky phase and understanding where you're going to be when you do test.
hmm yeah, yeah. I would see it kind of a little bit of a later on.
Yep.
Yeah, yeah. And that's where I know this isn't maybe my experiences I'm taking with a little bit of a grain of salt, just in that I haven't done the real base work on this
Yep.
sort of thing. So it is not really appropriate for what I'm doing right now. But since I'm mainly still finishing out some skill stuff on the bike, I
Yeah. But
figured it's a good
that being
time to
said,
throw in some,
yeah, yeah,
yeah,
just playing around on it. But I think
playing
that being
around.
said, you're always a coach. So when I try these things out, I'm just testing it as doing experiential knowledge and seeing how it
Yeah,
feels and what I might find
totally.
that is appropriate to do. It's like, oh
hmm
wow, this feels like this. Okay, so this is what the tool is. When would I want to use this tool? Okay, I want to use this tool at this point. Like, all right, so now I'm doing 3 minute intervals with 3 minute rest. When would I want to use this tool? Okay, I'm going to use this tool here. So like I've talked to a lot of people about this before, but and trust me, in the past I've been in the mindset of like, that's stupid, never do that. Like, I don't think anything's stupid at this point. Like, the more I understand the complexities of training, the more I understand that there's never a stupid tool. There's just a poor application of that tool.
hmm Yeah,
You know?
or the wrong time, or the wrong person, or
Yep.
wrong sport, maybe.
Yep. Tying that all together, I just read a post from Eric Cressy. He posted up the velocity averages for one of the pitchers that he works with. He's been working with him for 4 years, and the velocities have been getting better and better from year to year. But he said that as he came in, he never had him squat, never had him do back squats. He's done goblet squat variations, he's done knee flexion, hip flexion stuff, but he says he's never had to back squat him. Yet he's throwing consistently around 100 miles an hour and getting more consistent over the years at that. So again, I think we try to look at the tools that we have and we try to put every single person into that. But I think you have to understand what the function of the athlete or the function that you're trying to make better with the athlete, and then see what tools would be applicable for that person.
hmm Yeah, and it isn't always the same. Yeah, I think I'm kind of coming around to more and more the idea that some of these things we consider staples maybe aren't really appropriate in all cases, or only to a certain degree or point, maybe.
Yeah, yeah. It was actually funny because I was talking to my fiance Laura about the squat obsession of strength and conditioning coaches, how everybody wants to get their athletes to squat more, and improve mechanics, improve velocity, it's like, well, do they need to? Does their sport allow them to? Do they have basic proficiency to prevent injury and allow for you to use knee and hip flexion movements as a training modality? Like, how far up the spectrum do they need to get without taking away from the sport and with minimizing risk? And you realize that, like, for most non-functional fitness athletes, doing a front rack kettlebell step up could be as far as they need to go.
Mm-hmm.
That's it. It's like, yep, that's good. And you can load that thing really heavy if you need to, or you can not load it and just really focus on time and retention and just the mechanics of the movement, and that's it. So it's almost like we have to have a strength and conditioning coach detox of the obsession of squatting.
Yeah, or mimicking other sports.
Yes.
I think that's part of
this person's real.
This all comes from.
Yeah, this person's real strong. Let me take that and then apply it to this person to make them real strong. But it's like, well, is that getting them better at the sport, though? So I think you have to be able to look objectively at what's going on. And it's challenging in a lot of sports that it's like, wow, this person's ERA got worse, their wins got better, like their velocity got better, but their accuracy decreased. It's like, what the hell? Like, so like, in subjective sports like baseball and even like things like ballet and all that kind of stuff, it's like, geez,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, totally. It's kind of, it's been kind of fun kind of trying to reshape my brain around, things that I need to do to get better at my sport, which, I don't need a lot of spinal rigidity to support heavy loads, because that's not something we do. And the force production is more of a lower leg and knee dominant, like sharp and explosive, but you don't have a lot of range of motion to work with. And so I honestly can't necessarily, outside of maybe for the hormonal stimulus and anabolic stimulus, that you would want to necessarily do any form of heavy squats, which kind of hence I've been doing double kettlebell squats.
Yeah.
Which those can get gnarly. And
you got that right.
And lateral, I have been doing lateral barbell squats, but that's wide stance, basically almost like Cossack.
Yes.
And the load, of course, is far lower than,
Scott, do you have maces at your gym?
I do.
Okay.
We just got, the last couple of weeks ago, we got some of the whole fleet of the Chris Duffin's shoulder rocks, which are loadable maces. Yes. And then I have all the club bells from back in the day. I have club bells from 45 pounds to 3 pounds.
Yeah. Have you tried to do like kettlebell, or club squat, like front squat kind of stuff and variations? Those will light you up.
Yes, those are great, and that's one I've periodically forgotten through the years, because it was just an early staple. But yeah, the lock out the weighted club or mace, and it gives you a very vertical torso, and the amount of spinal, just the loading of low true compressive force, but high tension.
So just think about it this way, because what we're always trying to do in our sport, let's say the sport that kind of dominates right now, our thinking is trying to get the load as close to the base of support as possible, and then increase force and acceleration through the bar, right? That's what our sport, whether it's CrossFit / weightlifting, whatever it might be, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Now, in a sport like baseball, in a sport like football, you're actually not loading the that close to your base of support. So actually things like club bells and that kind of stuff, where where you're putting yourself in a disadvantageous position, actually makes it even better for your crossover to the sport, right? So that's something we can kind of explore a little bit more.
That'd be something to dig into, and absolutely. Exactly.
Yeah. Cool.
Cool.
You got anything else for today there, Scott?
I think that's probably a good wrap for today.
Awesome, brother.
The clouds are coming in. It's dark in here. I don't know.
Yeah, I think it's got like about 10 degrees of shade in there. Cool.
I know. Yeah.
Well, I'm Sean LaFlock. You can get me at Sean@CrossFitDelrabeach.com.
I'm Scott Hagnes. You can get me at Scott@CrossFitPortland.com.
All right, Scotty. I'll talk to you next week.
All right. Take care.
Later, dude.